Hello, everybody, and welcome to Who the Fuck is in the Mirror. Woo! My voice is so crappy today, so just roll with it, okay? So today we are going to be talking about Chapter 7 in The Body Keeps the Score, getting on the same wavelength, attachment and attunement. Now, he opens up this chapter by saying this quote: "The roots of resilience are to be found in the sense of being understood by and existing in the mind and heart of a loving, attuned, and self-possessed other." I fucking love that, because the biggest problem is being understood, right? Is having a sense of not being alone. So the problem, and we'll get into it in this chapter, but the problem with children with trauma is that it is incredibly hard once they have been through their trauma, whether it be abuse, physically abusive, sexually abusive, like molestation, rape. I mean, witnessing other people going through the same issues. The biggest part is them understanding the issues that they're going through by having somebody else there to help them understand. The most profound thing that I ever learned was that a child that's going through trauma is not going to comprehend for a while. You can literally go crazy trying to help. But the problem is that kids, until they are about 12 years old, their brain has not, their brain has not developed enough to be able to comprehend. You know, you have the 3 layers of the brain, right? It goes like a ladder. You learn from the bottom up. You grow from the bottom up with your brain. So we're talking the brainstem, which is just the normal things, right? You notice temperature, you notice sounds, you sleep, eat, those things. Then you have the limbic system, which, as we all know, the limbic system, if you listen to my podcast on a regular basis, the limbic system deals with emotions. You've got your amygdala in there, the hippocampus. You're literally working on your memories and your emotions, right? That's what level children come in. Now, if they have trauma, going to that next level is going to be difficult. The third level, which is where you have your prefrontal cortex, which, as we all know, if you've been listening to my podcast, it is where you are able to actually comprehend things and think things through. So sometimes, you know, when you get really pissed off at somebody, an adult, a child, whoever it is, and they just do stuff impulsively, and you're like, why did you fucking do that? Or they hurt someone physically, mentally, whatever the case is. Well, the thing is that they may have never, obviously it's a case-by-case basis, but they may have never reached the third level. So when you sit there and say this person's a narcissist, this person is bipolar, this person, it may not even be the case, which is what this chapter is all about. Now, Kolk, he starts doing a study, right? So he's doing a study, and he's talking about children that are in this children's clinic. So he's talking about these kids with trauma. They were at once starving for affection and angry and defiant. The girls in particular could be painfully compliant. For a second, just think. Let your mind wander. What painfully compliant? That codependency, that need for another person. The self-possessed other, like we were talking about, right? Whether oppositional or clingy, none of them seemed able to explore or play in ways typical for children their age. Some of them had hardly developed a sense of self. They couldn't even recognize themselves in a mirror. How fucking wild is that, right? Because literally the name of my podcast, Who the Fuck is in the Mirror? It is so hard for them to get that sense of self. And if you don't know who you are, just think of a person with amnesia. How angry they must be all the fucking time. They have no idea who they are anymore. A lot of times, they turn into a completely different person. And they're actually shocked when you explain to them, this is who you are. They're like, what? Because they lost that sense of self. Now, one person that works there, Kolk talks about specifically, her name's Nina. So Nina's privileged position and personal charm gave us access to the children's clinic, which is where he's at, right? But here's the kicker. He says, which was run by child psychiatrists who had little interest in actual fucking trauma. So I remember when my daughter, she went to a behavioral health facility that you guys would know from my story. But she went there and she's there for like a week, right? And what do they tell you when you start a new relationship? They tell you that you're not going to actually know that person, right? Because they see sides of you. And is that actually their accurate self? So they were telling me that she was bipolar. They took her off all of her meds. We're talking meds that she was on for her PTSD from her trauma from her father. And then, what is it called? Defiant disorder. So it's ODD. I don't remember. I'll be honest with you guys. I'll figure it out. But anyways, I think it's obsessive defiant disorder. So they literally have to be defiant, right? In their mind, they have to be defiant, which is true when you deal with trauma. Not because they're really being defiant, though. It's because they've been through fucking trauma, right? So, so when they go and visit there, Kolk, he talks about Henry Murray. So he became famous for designing the widely used thematic of perception test. It's called the TAT test. So basically, this test is a set of cards that they have. It helps you discover how people's inner reality shape their view of the world. It gives realistic but pretty traumatic scenes that you look at, and you look at it and you say, okay, what is your reality of the world by what you perceive in this picture? So obviously they didn't want to do really traumatic scenes for these kids because they've been through fucking hell, right? So they do, he teams up with Nina, And they cut out these pictures that are found in magazines in the waiting room. And they do this study with kids ranging from 6 to 11 years old. Now remember, 12 is when cognitively children are more able to comprehend more and understand things in a more intellectual and cognitive way. Right? So in general, these kids are already going to have difficulty, whether you've had trauma or not. However, the people that have had trauma tend to have their cognitive level even further down, right? Which is actually what happened with my children for a long time. So anyway, they pick two groups of kids. One group is from the clinic, and one group is from a school nearby, but they pick them with similar age ranges, race, their intelligence is very similar, and their family organization, like how their family is, right? So the difference between them was the abuse that the kids from the clinic suffered from their families, where they were like severely bruised in some instances from being beat. There were children there that were molested. There were kids that were tortured in a chair, tied down. There was a little girl who watched her mom get raped, dismembered, burned, and put into the trunk of a car. Now, also, the mom had a pimp who was accused of sexually molesting this poor girl. Like, fuck. You just watched your mom get fucking... So, of course, she's going to be off, right? I don't know a single person in the entire fucking universe that would not be off by that. I digress. Now, the children from the other group, they're not just like, oh, I've never experienced anything in the world, right? So we're talking, they still saw a lot of shocking violence. There was a boy who threw gasoline on a classmate, set him on fire. He didn't do it, but he let me rephrase that. There was a boy that witnessed another boy setting another boy. Okay, so there's three in this story. So he witnesses this. There was another child who was caught in a crossfire while walking to school with his buddy and his dad. He was wounded, shot in the fucking groin, and his friend died. So Kolk's looking at this, and he's thinking, I wonder if there's even going to be a difference, because they've been through shit too. So the kids are looking at these pictures, which is in the book that they got from the magazine. And what the first picture that they show is two kids. There's a younger one, she looks about maybe 5, right? And then there's the older one, looks like he could be just turning teenager level, so probably about 12, 13. And they're standing there. She's holding a hammer in her hand. They're both smiling. He's leaning down talking to his dad. His dad is underneath a car about waist deep in. So he's sitting on one, or he's laying on one of those, rolly things that you do. I don't know what they're called, guys. But he's sitting on one of those to roll underneath the car. Okay? So, they're all smiling. He's looking at them. They're looking at him. Everybody's smiling and happy. So the control kids from the school, they say things like, hey, maybe the kids are going to go to McDonald's with their dad afterwards. Or maybe the car is going to get fixed. Well, the traumatized kids are not saying that. oh, it's going to just get fixed, right? Everything is going to be fine and gravy. Like, leave it to Beaver kind of thing, right? While the traumatized kids came up with way worse tales. One of the little kids, particularly this little girl, is saying that the girl in it is holding a hammer because she is going to smash her father's skull with the hammer. Like, what the actual fuck did this little girl go through? We always look at the problem, we don't look at the reason. I mean, my kids were moved 4 fucking times to 4 different schools in the last 4 years. And this is the first time they're actually staying with the same school. Because I believed that there had to be somebody out there that gave a shit about what happened to them. Just like the fucking psychiatrists at this facility, right? They looked at the kids as problems. They looked at them with their diseases and said they had diseases, right? But they didn't look at, for a second, what is going on in these poor children's heads. So then there's a boy from the traumatized group. He's about 9 years old. He was physically abused severely by his family. He said that the boy that was crouching down talking to his father, he's going to kick away the jack so the car mangles his father's body and his blood will splatter all over the garage. Now, when I was little, you say shit like that, and they lock you in the loony bin, right? Nothing good, and I'm not saying that all people are bad who work at these facilities, right? But when do we allow the kids to understand their own stories and why they think that way? Locking my daughter up, essentially, in the behavioral health facility only made her worse because she looked at herself with hatred. So when you're thinking about that, what happens in this story is that Kolk is talking about the stories as they're being told to the kids are like super fucking dysregulated, but also super hyper, right? Oh, they must have ADHD. Or they're fucking thinking about these things and they can't even fucking process. They are literally screaming inside their fucking brains for someone to help them. What they ended up having to do is they had to take these kids on walks and they had to go to the water cooler before they could move on to the next picture even. Here's what I found incredibly interesting, right? Which is what I was just talking about. What it says is that it was little wonder that almost all of them had been diagnosed with ADHD. And most were on Ritalin, though the drugs certainly don't help or seem to dampen their arousal in this situation. The reason why I say it's interesting is because mental health is quote unquote so popular now, right? It's so popular. I can't tell you how many people are like, trauma, the word trauma is so popular. Hence why, like, all of my episodes have that in it. Well, that and I talk about trauma, But back in the day, you could not even write the word trauma. People would be like, whoa, the fuck? Cry in the shower. Nope, I'm going to cry in the shower, or I'm going to go smoke some weed, which people still, but I'm going to go smoke a cigarette. I'm going to take a shot, which I'm not shaming anyone for doing these things. What I'm saying is, notice how that was our form growing up. If you're around my age in your 30s, 35 plus, we won't go into that, guys. But mental health is out there. It is a thing now. Inner child work, shadow work, all this beautiful stuff, right? But especially for this book's purposes and for all of our purposes and people older than us, right? If you're a grandparent even, we were not allowed to even talk about these things. Even now, kids are made fun of. My daughter is made fun of for crying, for having feelings, for being emotional. Now, even though there's all this acceptance, what we're still trying to get people to understand, what I mean by we is people in the mental health field, is that ADHD is not necessarily always associated with an actual ADHD diagnosis, meaning you don't have any trauma that makes you have ADHD. It's just that. Right? It's not necessarily always associated with an actual ADHD diagnosis. I said it again, because it's not. I'm diagnosed with ADHD, and I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's not my ADHD. My ADHD pills deal with actual inability to focus, but it also deals with binge eating disorder and depression, which I didn't even know that, okay? And I was like, oh, fuck. Like, I was out for months, and I was a complete shit show. Complete shit show. I was crying all the time, eating all the time. And then when I got my new psychiatrist, and I was telling them, yeah, I've been off it for a while, and I don't know why. I just keep crying. And this is before I even started working on myself. So I had no fucking idea. Why? Because we were told, sit still, look pretty. We were told, suck in your feelings, right? Don't have feelings. And we were also told, pray about it, right? But if we don't even know, because nobody's educated on us, just praying about it is not the answer. We have to do more than that, right? Okay. So, my children are all three diagnosed with ADHD, which I find very interesting because, again, they've all been through trauma. So even now, I can't tell you how many times it's like an automatic, oh, well, let's diagnose them with this. Let's diagnose them with this. We have to be the advocate for our children. Don't just sit there and say they're a doctor so they know what the fuck they're talking about. No! Just because they have a degree doesn't mean they fucking know anything. No offense. But I've had multiple therapists for my children over the years ask me for advice. I've had my own therapist. I mean, hell, one of my therapists asked me, Angela, you're a nurse, and how long is cocaine in your system? What the fuck? just because they have that education does not mean that you do not advocate for your child. Because these children are going through issues that they can't even comprehend. Now, even if that's seeing their parents get a divorce, or you guys are unhappy, but you stay together for the kids, that is so fucking toxic. You are teaching those kids that it is okay to not be happy with yourself. How can you be happy with yourself when you're stuck in a relationship with someone that doesn't even understand you and isn't on the same path as you? It doesn't mean that person is horrible. But it does mean that your child is going to be so confused when they get older. Talk to the children. Explain to the children. I'll get off my pedestal. Let me keep going. Now, so these kids, right, they're also talking about a pregnant woman who's silhouetted against the window. So this traumatized child, this hurt my heart. She's a 7-year-old girl, but was sexually abused at age 4. She begins talking about penises and vaginas at 7 and keeps asking Nina, who's the lady that's working with Kolk, right? How many people have you humped? Like, you can sit there as an adult. Here's the go-to, right? We sit there and we're like, oh, you can't say stuff like that. Oh, don't talk like that. Why do we have to hush the child when they're clearly, subconsciously trying to tell us something? How did she learn that phrase, how many people have you humped? Why is she talking about penises and vaginas? Instead of shaming these children, why the fuck can't we just accept them, teach them, and love them? So there was this other 7-year-old, but she's from the control group. She picks up the incomplete essence and mood of this picture. She says it is a widow lady, sadly looking out the window, missing her husband, but in the end, the lady found a loving man to be a good father to her baby. If we are not explaining to our kids what is wrong and what is right and why it's wrong and right, and teaching them to love themselves, how will they ever learn to love themselves? I mean, the kids that are in the controlled group are seeing these things that could be signified as trouble. However, their reactions make them seem to feel safe, protected, loved in their own families. Kolk says that they feel loved by at least one of their parents in these situations, which made a huge difference in their eagerness to engage in school work and to learn. If you cannot connect the dots, why would you even be able to think clearly enough to learn? You're too busy trying to figure out who the fuck you are. So then you have the clinic children for the same thing, right? Who even in the most innocent images felt danger, aggression, sexual arousal, and terror. So it's not like they pick pictures where they knew this person was going to be triggered. They just picked random fucking pictures from magazines, and what did they find? They found that the abused children, their problem was not the picture. Their problem was that their world was filled with triggers. Constant triggers. I remember getting my kids back after the whole DCS thing, and I can't tell you how many times my son would put his hands in his face anytime I had to scold him or anything. He'd, right? And people would yell at, don't do that, Angel, don't do that. And Angel, I would have to tell them, like, no, you need to understand. His brain cannot connect. It's not that he thinks I'm going to hurt him. It's that he has been hurt and he's trying to protect himself. See, Kolk says that as long as they can imagine only disastrous outcomes to relatively benign situations, anybody walking into a room, any stranger, any image on a screen or on a billboard might be perceived as a harbinger of catastrophe. In this light, the bizarre behavior of the kids at the children's clinic made perfect sense. So instead of the kids just being bizarre and not being accepted, they make perfect sense because of their trauma. My son would also sit there and he would, if he spilled a cup of water, right, or spilt a drink or spilled food, right, and you're like, Angel, he would just stand there, stare. He would just stare. And you know what my daughter, my oldest, started doing? She would go up to him and she would say, it's okay, you're safe now. Do you know how painful that is to know that your child hurts that way? But to be so grateful that you didn't allow your intergenerational trauma to affect the way that you watch your kid, instead of yelling at them for spilling their fucking cup. Give them love because it's not that fucking serious. It's a fucking cup. What's even more alarming is that Kolk says that the staff didn't really ever mention the experiences of the children and the impact that they had on their feelings and their regulation and the way that they thought. Instead, these poor kids were being diagnosed with a whole bunch of different fucking things. ADHD was the comorbid diagnosis for almost all of them. So are we trying to say that ADHD has increased? Or are we trying to say that we're just trying to sweep it under the rug and say that they have ADHD because we can't deal with the emotions of watching our children and understanding that they have trauma because we can't even fucking deal with our own trauma? We want to sit there and fix everybody else, but we can't fucking sit with the fact that we ourselves need help. Do you know how many times I hear people say, I'm good? Because the thought of asking for help or the thought of trying to change things in themselves makes them uncomfortable. And why the fuck would anybody want to be comfortable? It is way easier to be super cozy and comfortable and just sit there and watch Netflix for hours on end so we don't have to think about our feelings. Because sitting with those is an unbearable feeling. So because of all of this, Kolk talks about two different things. One was to learn whether the different worldview of normal children could account for their resilience, and on a deeper level, how each child actually creates the map of the world. The other equally crucial question was, is it possible to help the minds and brains of brutalized children to redraw their inner maps and incorporate a sense of trust and confidence in the future? Now, we're not going to be talking about those today because as we get further in this book, I want to really dive deeper and deeper into these chapters. You know, the more you grow, the more you learn, the more you want to grow and learn. And I want to be able to get on these chapters and understand this on a better level. Now, that being said, I do want to say that it is fucking possible. It is fucking possible, even if you're that child that went through those traumas and you're an adult now and you're sitting there and saying, oh no, I'm good now. I just drink to cover it up. Because we think it's funny, right? We think it's humorous. But how humorous is it when you're sitting alone on a holiday and you push everybody away because the thought of even asking for help or asking for forgiveness or asking for advice or understanding is disgusting to you. It's unbearable to you. We are teaching our children the way we want to be treated and we want them to be treated. If we are not giving them time, when they grow up, they too will not give anybody time. I'm too busy for this. I'm too busy for a relationship. I'm too busy to love, to have kids, because they're so worried, just like us, so fucking terrified that the kids are going to go through stuff. But as we've seen, kids are going to go through stuff. But having you there as a sounding board and teaching them how to love. My daughter's anger, I can't tell you how many times she has sat there and said, Mom, I am not enough. Mom, can you change your job? Because I don't really see you. And she sees me, but she wants to see me more, obviously. All kids want to do that, right? But do you know what I told her? I said, imagine you and your anger issues, and you and your emotions, and you and your internal struggles of feeling that you're not enough. Now imagine adult women feeling the same way you did, feeling guilty for loving themselves, for giving time to themselves. We always want to help our kids, but we can't even help ourselves. How can we be examples to our kids and teach them to respect themselves if we don't respect ourselves in our own fucking time? When I explained it to her, she was like, wow, Mom, you do need to do this. That is big for a 13-year-old to understand. Something that deep. Change is possible. Working on yourself while having kids is possible. Helping your kids, even though they've been through the worst things, is possible. The first step is to be a listener. Listen to all that they tell you. Communicate. Have your own boundaries, and if you don't know what your own boundaries are, hit me up. Let me help you to connect with your child and to feel confident in yourself. Your kids will respect you more and understand you more. You are teaching your kids how to treat themselves by the way you treat yourself. Next week, We're going to be diving into those two crucial questions and seeing what Kolk has to say. A lot of the stuff he says, and like, we already know a lot of these things, but do we really know? Can we really comprehend? How many words do we know out there, but we don't actually know what the fuck they mean? How many times do we say, oh, that's a red flag, and we don't even understand? I had a guy tell me that slapping your hands together was a red flag. No, honey, that's called a trigger from your own past. Be willing to open. With that, thank you so much for fucking joining today. I look forward to diving into this chapter. It's probably going to be a 3-parter. It's good shit. But it's not about the ending, getting done with this book. It's about the destination. And I love that you guys are all going on this destination with me. I hope you guys have a fucking phenomenal day. And I look forward to talking to you next week. Whoop, whoop.